Without faith, it's impossible to please God. For he who comes to God must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him. We are people of faith. We trust in God. We have been able to examine evidence. We've been able to read the scriptures, which are both historical accounts of God working in the past, as well as seeing him work in our current lives today. And so we trust in his promises, and we believe that he will continue to be with us, just like he said, and that even our future is secure based on his revelation to us. And so we have faith. But if you're like anybody in the scriptures as you read through, even people that we call men of great faith or women of great faith, there were times where they sometimes struggled in what they believed, that they had some doubts, they had some questions, maybe even they had some fear. And so today I want to talk about this idea that we do have faith. And so even as a man in the days of Jesus, as Russ just read to us, the idea of, I do believe, but help my unbelief. I've got a lot of faith, but it's not all the way to be what it should be. And maybe as we look at this man's life, it may help us, certainly that we would not, judge him, beyond measure. Because certainly he had been through a lot. He had a lot of struggles in his life. And most of it centered around his son, who was demon-possessed. And sometimes people look at that today and say, well, he had an ailment. Maybe he had epilepsy. And maybe it was kind of manifested as we would say epilepsy, but that's not what the Bible called it. It was demon possession. Just to be clear, that does not mean that if people today have epilepsy that it is demon possession. That's completely different. But this young boy, don't know exactly how old he was, but he was the son of a father, and he had a demon that was literally destroying his life. And so if we go through some of the scriptures, this is found in all three Gospels, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, called the Synoptic Gospels, which sometimes explain the same events and the same teachings and the same miracles. But if we go through them, we can kind of put the pieces together to see what the problem was and what this father had been encountering on a regular basis with his son. So Matthew 17 says that he had seizures, that he had great suffering, and he often fell into fire and water. And that certainly is something that is very challenging back then, because people had fires often. It was not just, for the evening, you gather around a little campfire, and it was not for s'mores. It was to cook on a daily basis. It was to keep one warm. And it was a place maybe where people could congregate, but fires were common throughout the cities. And even little cisterns of water where people could store some water. They did not have running water, so water and fire were kind of like everywhere. Whenever you went out, you'd pass these all the time. And now this young boy would fall into fire or water. So think about what kind of stressful events those are in a parent's life. Mark 9 gives us maybe the longest description of what was going on here. It says he was possessed, he cannot speak, he had seizures, he was thrown down to the ground because of this evil spirit, foams at the mouth, gnashes his teeth, becomes rigid, has convulsions. But look at this, it was since he was a child. This has not just been something that happened last week. It's just an early diagnosis. We're not sure what we should do. Maybe it'll go away on its own. No, this has been going on for a long, long time. But look what it says here, often thrown into the fire, and the purpose was to kill him. It's not like it just accidentally happens. It's not like this spirit wanted to injure the boy. This spirit wanted to kill him. Could you imagine what this young boy, again, I don't know if he was 8 or 10 or 15, but could you imagine what he looked like? He would have had burns all over his body. He must have been disfigured. He may even have been injured by falling to the ground so often. He was quite a mess. But not only could he not speak, but he was also deaf. So he could not speak, could not hear. So there's a lot going on with this young boy. Just a couple more things that we could look at in Luke. He was the only child he had. He didn't have any other kids, just this one child. And suddenly screams when this demon took over. He had convulsions, foams at the mouth. It seldom leaves him. In other words, these things that are happening all the time, perhaps even a daily occurrence. It's, sometimes when people have epilepsy today, sometimes it happens frequently. Other times it's like once a year or once every few years or once in a lifetime. But this boy happening all the time, and it's destroying him. So now you can feel the desperation, the concern, just the overwhelming feelings that this father has for his son. And you can only imagine that he's tried to do everything he can, taking him to the doctors, taking him maybe to people that may have some kind of medicine, taking him maybe to the priest at the temple. If you could maybe pray over him, maybe he could be healed. Trying desperately to help the son who he loves. And whether you're a mother or a father, or just if you're just like a regular human being, I'm just trying to include everybody, we can put ourselves in that position and say, this man is desperate. Like this man is at the end of his rope. This man is at the last of his options. What can he do with his son? But there's some good news. Maybe this is the last ray of hope. The disciples have power to heal people and to cast out demons. So we find that in Matthew chapter 10. Jesus sent out the disciples, and they had this power. And it says there, Jesus gave them this power. You remember when they came back to give a report to Jesus about their mission escapade that they had? They said that even the demons submit to us. So they're pretty excited that they can cast out demons and they can heal people of all kinds of different things. So they had power. I don't know if this man came looking for disciples. He may have came looking for Jesus. But Jesus was not around. There was only 9 of the apostles that were here in this place. So maybe we would say near the foot of the mountain, because you remember Jesus had gone up the mountain with Peter, James, and John, Mount of Transfiguration. And that's when this first part happened. Jesus was on the mount. And it's interesting because you remember what Peter said when they were up there? They said, Lord, why don't we make 3 tabernacles, 3 places where we can stay up here for a while. Like we want to stay up on the mountain. We want to stay up in glory. We want to stay up where things are, they're well and they're peaceful and there's revelation and there's closeness to God and there's this picture of even Jesus in his glorified state. This is amazing. Wouldn't it just be good to stay on the mountain all the time? But no, they need to go back down into the valley. Where the people are who are hurting, where the people are who are doubting, where the people were that were suffering. People there needed to be taught, needed to be led, needed to be healed. But you get down into the world, it's messy. But Jesus and the 3 apostles came down and they came upon this situation then. So when they came down from the mountain, the crowd and this man approached Jesus and knelt before him. And this is what he said, Lord, have mercy on my son. So you kind of get this feeling bowing down, humbling himself before Jesus, kind of in the place of pleading and begging. We say getting down on his knees to pray, asking, Lord, please have mercy on my son. Really, if you can't do anything, nobody can do anything. Please have mercy. In Luke's account, chapter 9, it says, a man called out in the crowd to Jesus, Teacher, I beg you, look at my son, for he's my only child. And if you put these two together, maybe initially he's just saying, teacher, I beg you. He falls to his knees, Lord, please have mercy. Just, it wasn't just a one-time thing. He was probably begging and pleading and even crying. Lord, please help me. Help my son. Help our family. Please heal this situation. So desperate times. Now, maybe we feel like we've had times in our life, and hopefully for us it's not as often as this man every day. But sometimes we know that things that go on in our life, the challenges and the struggles, maybe it's a health problem. Maybe it's a relational issue. Maybe it's something I'm dealing with fear and with concern and worry. Maybe it's sin I've been struggling with for such a long time. And Lord, hear my prayer. Lord, I beg you, please. This is the state of a man who's desperate for something to change, for something to get better, to get out of this pit that he is in for his only child. He says, but if you can do anything at all, like just maybe make it a little better would be better than nothing. If you can do anything at all, take pity on us. Just look at our situation. Look how much we're hurting. Have some compassion. Take pity on us and help us. Now, that's a challenge. This is kind of where the story continues. If you can do anything. If you can do anything? Do you hear a little bit of doubt in his voice? Oh, why would he have doubt? Well, I don't know how much he knew about Jesus. Maybe he had just heard that Jesus could heal, that Jesus could cast out demons, that Jesus had the power of God, that Jesus actually cared for people. Maybe he had just heard about that. So he may have had some doubt. There's some doubt in his voice, if you can do anything. Maybe he's just saying, maybe you can, but maybe you don't want to. Maybe you don't have mercy and compassion on us. Maybe you're able, but you're not willing. Well, maybe you're willing, but not able. If you can do anything. So what we're talking about is where people are in their faith. Now, if you look through the Mark 9 account, we see, first of all, 3 different groups of people when we talk about faith. When Jesus came down from the mountain, the scribes were at odds with these 9 disciples who could not cast out the demon. It doesn't really tell us exactly what they were talking about, but we're thinking it had something to do with this non-miracle they could not do, right? So there's, the disciples were there. This man says, well, I asked your disciples to cast out the demon. They could not. So now the scribes, the religious leaders get involved in this whole talk about, are you really, is God with you? Do you have all this power? Where is Jesus? All this stuff. But the scribes, let's talk about faith. Let's talk about belief. The scribes did not believe because of the hardness of their hearts. So there's one level of unbelief. They did not want to believe. They were not even open to believing. But then secondly, there was a different crowd of people that really did not believe. And that was the people that were there, and I would say more specifically to the 9 apostles that could not perform this miracle. Because when Jesus heard about this, he said, oh, unbelieving generation, how long will I be with you? Why can't you do this? Why don't you believe? You're an unbelieving generation. And perhaps they're talking specifically to the 12 apostles. If you only had belief and faith and trust, you could have cast out the demon, but you didn't. And now here is this man that certainly tries to muster up all the belief he can, but he says, I still struggle with my... Isn't it kind of good that sometimes you can just be honest with Jesus? You don't have to put on the church facade that, everything's going well in my life, and I've got all the faith I could possibly need, and, I'm a strong Christian all the time, and, I never struggle with questions or concerns or problems or fear or doubt. I'm a Christian. Isn't that what Christians are supposed to do? So do we sometimes put ourselves like in the ideal of what we think we ought to be or what other people expect us to be? Are you kidding me? I mean, don't we all struggle at some point through situations in our life? Through difficulties? Through a loss? Through an illness? Through something that's broken in our life? Yeah, we still struggle sometimes. Well, where's our faith? Well, do we sometimes react in the same way? God, if you are willing, God, if you are able, God, if you would, please intervene. Please heal me. Please cast out this evil in my life, this devil. And I'm not saying we're demon-possessed, but sometimes, if we're being tempted, who's tempting us? It's the devil. If we are fearful, who's put that idea in our minds? It's the devil, right? So cast that away. I want to be free. I want to live. I want to have peace and joy. I don't want to be attached to a son that's demon-possessed. I want this healing for our family. If you can do anything, have pity. Have pity on us and help us. So this is Jesus' response. And again, it's always hard to know how he said these first three words. Like, what do you mean, if you can? What's wrong with you? Where are you at? I mean, no, how come you don't? Or maybe it was more sympathetic. I understand where you're at. If you can I maybe elaborate more on that? So I don't know if it was more of a rebuke or more of a, let's talk about this, if you can. But if you can, said Jesus, everything is possible for one who believes. Everything is possible. Not everything is necessarily going to happen, but it's not like, Lord, if you can, because he can. God can do anything. I mean, you could say, well, I'm sick and the report's really bad. God can. Well, I've lost my job. God can. Right? I've got a broken relationship. God can. I'm struggling with a sin. God can. Now, he's not always going to do it as we expect, not always in our time. We know that God is always going to be with us, that God is going to continue to love us, that God is going to give us the strength even through the challenging times. Even if this son is not healed, God's still going to help me through it, give me strength. He's somehow going to work it out. So I trust in God that He is able. He is able. So where is my faith? So here is the man's response then. Maybe in a similar way to what our response would be in this situation. Immediately the boy's father cried out, I believe. I believe. I have faith. I trust you. But help my unbelief. I believe, but. See, I still have these questions. I still have reservations. I still don't see how this is going to work out. You don't understand how long I've been dealing with this and going through this, and how many times I've had some hope, but then I've been let down. And even when I went to your disciples, it seemed like everything was going to work out. All the promising facts were there that, yes, these guys can do it, and they couldn't do it. So I'm just being real. I still have some unbelief, but help me to believe. Help me that I can be stronger. Help me that I can surrender to you. Help me that I can be able to say, I do believe without any but. And so Jesus healed his son. Jesus didn't rebuke him. He didn't say, well, that's not enough faith. Come back tomorrow, maybe you'll have more faith. Jesus healed his son, even when there's doubt. So for Jesus to bless your life, it doesn't mean you have to be perfect in your actions or in your attitude or in your faith. Maybe it just means you have to be honest. And you want to grow. And you want to see God work. And you want to trust him more. I believe, help my unbelief. Well, how did the story end? Well, what is the overall thing maybe that we can learn through this faith growing process? How can I have greater faith? And maybe that would be a study in itself to see what the Bible says about increasing in faith and growing in faith and learning how to be more faithful to God. But we don't have time for that. But it wouldn't be a bad idea to finish the story, to see what happens at the end. So afterwards, Jesus went inside a house, and his disciples asked him privately, well, why couldn't we drive out the demon? Why couldn't we do it? Now listen to what Jesus says. This kind can only come out by prayer. This kind can only come... Now some translations say this kind can only come out by prayer and fasting. Prayer and fasting. You know, earlier on, when Jesus addressed the problem, he said, you're an unbelieving and perverse generation. This demon is not cast out because you do not believe, because you have doubts. We just finished talking about the Father's doubt, but it's the disciples who doubted that they were able to do it. That's what he said at the very beginning. We asked your disciples to cast out the demon, and Jesus said, oh, unbelieving and perverse generation, how long will you doubt? Why do you doubt? You don't trust, you don't believe, you don't have faith. So now at the end, if they say, well, why couldn't we cast it out? The only way the demon can be cast out is by prayer. But it's not because they weren't praying. It's because they did not have faith. Here's your homework. Go home and think about it, study it. Maybe Jesus is not saying the way a demon is cast out is by prayer. The way unbelief is cast out of your life is through prayer. This doubting of faith is cast out by prayer. Because if you have faith, nothing will be impossible. So what do we need more of? Power to cast out demons or more faith? We need more faith. Where does faith come from? You cast out fear through prayer and fasting. You cast out the doubt by calling on God and by seeking Christ and by learning, spending time with Jesus. That's how we grow in our faith, by prayer. Especially if it was prayer and fasting, right? If that is actually accurate, it's not like, well, you couldn't cast out that demon because it requires fasting. Now, usually we don't think of fasting for like 5 minutes, right? I mean, if you're not eating, if it's not lunchtime, you're not eating. Fasting is usually 2 or 3 days of fasting, or even at least 1 day. The religious leaders back then fasted twice a week, which would probably just be, it could have only been a 12-hour fast. But Jesus wasn't saying, well, it could take you 12 hours to cast out this demon because you got to have fasting involved. How about prayer and fasting before you are confronted with your fear, with your situation, with this dilemma in your life, before you are overwhelmed? Why not start out with prayer to be strong in faith? So when the situation arises, you're prepared, you're equipped, God is strong in your life, and you can overcome. I know we all struggle with this idea of, I do believe. I mean, I don't think you would be here today if you did not believe. But we all struggle sometimes with help my unbelief. I still have doubts. If you can, I'm not sure. I don't know how this is going to turn out. But we can't say, I trust you, God. And I want you to work in my life, and I want to have faith that you will bless me regardless of how things turn out. Can I trust God even if my epileptic son is not healed? That's another part of the challenge. In this case, a blessing, a healing. The demon was cast out and the boy was restored. That's just another picture of the power of God. And God continues to work in our life. And we continue to grow in our faith, getting stronger as time goes along, so that we can face any kind of adversity or trial or challenge in our life and know that we can be faithful because God has been faithful. So a man, I wrote down just a few words, frustrated, discouraged, anxious, confused, tired, concerned, fearful, a man who's struggling. And sometimes when people have struggled that deeply for that long, sometimes they need compassion. They need somebody who cares. Not necessarily somebody who rebukes them, but somebody who encourages them. Because sometimes people get faint-hearted and they need to be built back up. And sometimes people are so tired of going through a challenging situation. They don't need a rebuke. They need rest. And sometimes people that are overwhelmed, they need grace. And sometimes people that are isolated need a friend. And sometimes when people have a heavy burden, they need somebody who can help carry it. And so the call is for us to be those kinds of people that can build up and strengthen those who are weak in faith and doubting and maybe even starting to wander away, to bring them back to a strong faith in Christ. We encourage you to pray for faith, to pray for others that faith may be built in their life as well. And if we can encourage you, to bless you today, if we can pray with you or for you, maybe if there's those that want to be a part of God's family, to be in a place where God is going to reach out and touch their life, to be in a covenant relationship, to be in a saved position with God, and that God, through His Spirit, would live in us and help us and strengthen us and grow our faith. If today someone wants to be baptized into Christ, we always offer that invitation for those that seek Christ as their Lord, to call on the name of Jesus, to repent of their sins, and to be immersed in baptism, where their sins are forgiven and they receive the gift of God's Spirit. But if we can encourage you today, we're going to sing this song, and we always want this to be an opportunity where you can respond to the Lord's invitation. So now Ken is going to come up and lead us in the song, "We Saw Thee Not." But the chorus is, "But we believe." So Ken, come up and lead us.